My major in college was learning and education studies with a concentration in applied learning science, and I chose that major after pursuing electrical and computer engineering. When I was going through school, I was given a lot of assignments by authority figures, and there wasn't a lot of context as to where those assignments would fit into anything that I would care about long term. I viewed the teachers and the administrators and my parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles as having the same authority shape of voice. And sometimes they would say that there were things I had to do without telling me why those things were relevant. And now that I'm older, some of the things they told me to do were just because they wanted me to do them. Not because they were helpful, not because they were developmentally meaningful, not because they were a reflection of my values. Which is challenging because that isn't all of school. It isn't the entire school system. The reason we structure our subjects the ways that we do, generally, is because we've had hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, wonder the same ways throughout history. So there is some value to the progression. But if you ask any individual person why they need to know, for example, chemistry, they might say that they've never used chemistry in their life. And there are technically other ways to exercise our minds. So if the goal is only to exercise our minds, maybe we don't need specifically chemistry. But then we run into situations where we're trying to describe the makeup of water. We say something like H2O, and that isn't something that we can guarantee another person understands if they've never had a chemistry course. They might have heard it before, it might have been discussed in a different science course, but we don't know if the fact or axiom has been internalized. When I realized how much of my education, up to the point where I dropped out, was not relevant to the direction I was trying to go in life, I dropped out after asking professors if I understood the premise of where I was correctly. I was also working on a student organization called Student Body for Meaningful Education, whose the goal of the student organization, was to figure out why we were where we were, learning the things that we were learning. That student organization had three committees: discussion, connection, and creation. And there's another video on my YouTube channel where I've gone into the structure in more detail. I interviewed students, administration, and professors, and asked them the question of why things were structured the ways they were. And I found that I actually probably would enjoy going through an undergrad degree. I'd probably enjoy going through grad school. But the thing that I was pursuing was a degree. It wasn't the educational experience that was the reason all of the people I interviewed were spending all of their time doing what they were. If I only asked them, why would I get a degree in learning? They could give me an answer, and that wouldn't have been a meaningful conversation. Because if I got the degree and any of them turned out to be wrong about the reasons that degree was valuable, I'd probably discard their opinion. We are in an education crisis, and I can recognize patterns of perpetuating the same patterns. I can recognize that there's perpetuation of the same patterns of giving people a frame that is coercive and not relevant to the core values, doesn't represent a meaningful synthesis of why we would spend time together. And the path forward is basically to acknowledge that the government has been doing performances of back pay. And I can say, you can copy me. You can make the videos that I've been making. If you make the videos that I've been making verbatim and think about the reasons why I would improvise the subject. Try to put it into your own words. It might be boring, and you might only do that for a few videos. Someone else has been making content for the same reasons. We can be appalled that students aren't writing papers the ways they used to. The ways that students wrote papers in the 80s are different than the ways students approach the concept today. And also, we hope that humans can express their ideas and values and come up with an idea, pretty much. We hope that humans can come up with an idea and describe it, talk about it for a while coherently, produce something valuable. Gemini has a concept of gems, and also on YouTube, we can ask Gemini to summarize videos. If a video isn't saying much, Gemini won't have much to describe as being said. Do phonics help? Yeah. Is the literacy crisis alarming? To a degree, yeah. And also, adults who watch TV instead of reading for, well, I don't want to make this too personal. I noticed that the adults who read and write have a much more vivid relationship with development than the ones who only passively consume their favorite shows. Approaching this from the perspective of a learning scientist, one of the research ooh, projects, is it a project? Labs, I think, is the more relevant space that I want to evoke. I was in a research lab, and the project that I was working as a research assistant on was comparing the impact of brain training games and reading, wondering about the cognitive effects of playing brain training games versus reading nonfiction and fiction. It turns out that reading has a lot of cognitive benefits, and having a diverse set of books that you can try to empathize with, that you can try to process, place your mind into the frames of consideration, that's really good for your brain. So, I dropped out of school, got hired as a software engineer, and have been working on a project to address literacy as a more expansive space. Also, I need some funding. You can help out with that. And also, if you do, I don't know, what's a good reward for supporting literacy development? How do I make this transactional enough for someone to respond to their capacity to contribute? Let me know in the comments. Cheers.